And now, right to your host of this House of Musicians, Barry Smith.
Hey, fine listeners. Welcome to this House of Musicians radio show on Reality Radio 101. We hope you enjoy the next hour with us as we do our small part to help promote musicians, bands, and venues. Gary LaBar, how are you this evening?
I'm excited this evening, and you know why.
Two-time Juno Award-winning artist, Mr. Jack DeKeyzer, is on the show. Jack is a British-born Canadian blues guitarist, vocalist, songwriter, and producer. He's twice won the Juno Award, Canada's highest musical honor, and 7 times received Maple Blues Awards, including Blues Album of the Year in 2000 and Lifetime Achievement Award 2001. Real Blues Magazine crowned him Live Act of the Year in 2001, and has been twice named Guitarist of the Year. What an accomplishment, and what a great music career. Jack DeKeyzer, we're honored to have you on the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks, Barry. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you, my friend. As I say, I've been following, we talked a little earlier, I was mentioning that I've been following you for an awful long time. I know you've been around the scene for a very long time, and you've done a lot of great gigs and made some wonderful music. I want to start by asking you, though, how you were influenced by music when you were younger. Did your siblings have an album collection that you got turned on to, or were your parents musicians? I'm just curious to how you were introduced by music and got into music.
Well, actually, I was an adopted only child, so I don't know where the music came from as far as naturally, but I grew up in England, and in England in the early 60s, the big artist was Cliff Richard. He was a rock and roll. He was the European Elvis, and he's still going, actually. And his band was called The Shadows, and they were a 2-guitar they're more guitar, but two lead guitar player kind. They were like the British Ventures. So my mom took me to see a movie called The Young Ones, and I think that was in like 1962. And I watched the whole thing. I just fell in love with it, and then I asked her if we could watch it a second time. We watched it twice, and then I said, "Mom, can we watch it again?" And God bless her, I watched it for about another 20 minutes. And so I was hooked. And then about 2 or 3 years later, the Beatles came out with "Love Me Do" and "Please Please Me" and "From Me to You," and that kind of clinched the deal. So that's sort of when I became a musician in my head, anyway. And I got a guitar. I got a guitar a few years later.
Of course, and so many artists we've had on the show, a fair number of them have always referenced the Beatles as as a big part of their inspiration. And so for you as well. But I guess the Ed Sullivan thing was the big thing.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I'd seen them on shows in England. So, but yeah, of course, I think one was Ed Sullivan, 64 or 65. So we had moved to Canada by that point. So I of course I remember all those shows, and I was a big fan of the Rolling Stones. And also the Kinks. So it was an exciting time in music, for sure.
It definitely was. So did you know about, so you're saying you knew about the Beatles in England before they came to America?
Yeah. Well, they were playing the Beatles on the radio in England before here, right? So I'd heard them in England.
That's amazing, because I think most of North America probably wouldn't have if they were playing them on the radio in England at the time. So that's kind of really neat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're English, so.
Yeah, right. Of course. And now, so you obviously an amazing guitar player. When were you introduced to the guitar, and do you remember getting your first guitar? And I guess I don't want to ask too many questions all at once, but do you still have it?
No, I was, well, as I said, I think the Shadows, Hank Marvin, he was the lead player of that band, and he's still going. And so that was my introduction to the electric guitar. And when we lived in England friends of my parents gave me an acoustic guitar when I was about 7. And I guess nobody knew anything about guitar in my family or anything. So I'm sure it was probably, the strings were a mile off the neck, and it was probably too big for me. So it just sort of sat at the foot of my bed for a couple years. And then when we moved to Canada in 65, that's when I got my first electric guitar, and it was called we ordered it through the Sears catalog, which is kind of funny because you read a lot about the old blues guys, and they got their first guitars through the Sears catalog down south. And so I got this guitar. It was just probably terrible. It was called a Saturn, and but it looked like a Stratocaster. It had about 4 pickups, but I don't have it anymore.
You don't have it, but what age were you at this time, and how did you learn how to play? Was it all just by ear?
Yeah, I was 10, and so I remember I went to, my parents signed me up to a group lessons, and they were teaching us Down in the Valley, or some kind of folk song that had
Jingle Bells, yeah.
2 chords with 1 finger on each chord. And I got a Beatle book, and I got another book, and I was learning all the chords. So I'd learned like G and C and D and A, and I hadn't got F down yet, or B7, but I got those ones. And I remember going to the lesson the next week, and I go like, well, when are we going to start learning Beatles? And the guy go like, well, we're still doing Down in the Valley, right? And so after the 3rd lesson, I thought, well, I'd already learned every chord in the chord book I had, so I quit that, and then I just taught myself and copied records. And then there was a couple of kids in the neighborhood who were pretty good, and I would just seek out the guys who were the best and get stuff from them. And gradually the neighborhood got bigger. It became the whole city. And then I started playing professionally, and then it became the whole country. And then so I started working with the best people around.
Absolutely. Tell me about the first time you played live on stage. What you were doing at that time, or was it blues, and what that was like, just playing it for an audience?
Well, it's funny actually, because the very, very first gig I did, I think I was maybe 13, and we had a little band, and we were called Opus 4, the Opus 4. And and the drummer his parents had got him a great big huge set of Ludwig drums. They were just gorgeous, and we couldn't believe how professional they were and everything. And I had my crappy Saturn guitar, and then we had a keyboard player who played one of those little wooden organs with the 4 rickety legs on it that you get from the Sears catalog, and it has the speaker right inside of it. And we played at an old folks home. And I remember that the attendants kept coming up to us telling us it was too loud. And I'm sure none of our amps were more than about 10 watts, but it was too loud. And I remember we played Louie Louie, we played Wild Thing, we played I Can See for Miles by The Who, we played Satisfaction. And yeah, that's about what we were doing, playing the hits on the radio.
Right. And how did the old folks relate to a Who song?
I don't think we got a redate at that one. But after that, a couple years after that, when Cream came out and Hendrix, then we got some black lights, and we started painting our faces with day glow paint. And at that time we were playing in church basements, and we were playing at little community halls and little church dances, because that was the only place that you could play when you were before you could get into a bar. So we played a lot of kind of little community halls and coffee shops, and that's when I started playing gigs where people, where they liked us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just briefly, were you nervous the first time you came out and played?
No, you know what? I think I probably should have been, but I was just so young and I was so enthusiastic, and I just loved it so much that I don't ever recall being nervous.
Yeah, and usually if you're nervous, and I guess now when you play, you're not. I mean, is there any kind of nervousness walking out onto a stage with 5,000 people, 10,000 people? Any kind of nervousness at all, or does it? And if so, does it, like, usually for me when I was playing live, and of course only in small bars, I never saw the 5,000 people and all that stuff. I just saw the small bar thing, but in the Matador, I played down there from 2 to 5 with my band. But I remember just being nervous until everybody kind of was up dancing or clapping after the first song or something, and then it would kind of alleviate the nervousness.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny, you know, Barry, people have asked me that. For me, like, the bigger the crowd, the less nervous I am. It's like, the only time I get nervous is, say, if we're sitting around at somebody's house or we're having a little party out here, and then my wife will say, "Hey, why don't you play a song?" And I'll be like, "What? Now? Here? In front of these 5 people?" Like, and then that makes me nervous. But yeah, just playing in bigger gigs does not make me nervous. No, the smaller the gig, the more nervous I get these days.
Yeah, well, it's more personable when you're playing for your friends at home, that's for sure.
Yeah,
you're right.
Exactly.
You're right up close and whatnot. Okay, let me ask you about your first. So now you were writing songs. When did you start writing songs, Jack?
I started writing songs a little bit in my teen years, but nothing that really stuck out. I joined the band in 1979. That was signed to Attic Records in Toronto, and they were called the Bobcats, and they were like a rock and roll rockabilly band, like the Stray Cats. And when I joined that band, that's when I started writing, and I pretty well wrote most of their second album, and it was an album called Wild Jungle Rock.
Okay, and that was obviously a band situation, not solo. So,
right.
Yep, and how many albums did you do with the band at that time before you actually went out on your own and became a solo artist?
The Bobcats made 2 albums, and then the lead singer left, and I became the lead singer, and we changed our name to the Rock Angels, and they put out an EP, and after that, I decided, like, wow, I'm doing all this work and I'm fronting the band and all the pressure's on me and I'm writing all the songs. I'm going to change the name to my name. So that happened in 85. And that's when I started the Jack DeKeyzer band.
Yeah, and let me just jump way ahead here for this question, but were you playing any gigs before COVID started?
Oh yeah, like I was averaging about 120 gigs a year, and yeah, like in 2020, I think that one weekend when the hammer came down, it was like I think I lost about 50 shows in one weekend.
Holy smokes! Okay, I'm interested to know this: where you were at when the hammer came down, what you were doing, where you were playing, and how you were told, and when you decided to pack it all in and get home.
Well, we'd had a busy January, and February had been pretty busy. And in February, I recorded an album called Tribute at the end of February. And then the plan was to go to Cuba for a week and hang out, and then come back. And then I had a bunch of shows in March, April, May, June. And so we were just hearing like a little buzz about this COVID, and, but, nothing that really raised any alarm bells. And then we got to Cuba, and we were there the second day. And all of a sudden, it was all over everybody's phone. Oh, they're going to shut the borders, and you got to come home, and this is going to be a big thing, and they're going to lock everybody down. And so, yeah, we were in Cuba when I found out.
Wow. Yeah, and so you got home, and then of course everything's on lockdown. Now I know some musicians, some artists have been out playing recently here and there. Have you been out at all since COVID started?
Well, like a few times when they had lifted restrictions, we played a few indoor shows last year. And in the summer, we played a few festivals. We played at a couple of arena shows, or amphitheater shows in Quebec. But yeah, I mean, not that many. I probably since 2020, I've probably only done about maybe 15 shows tops.
Oh, okay. Yep. Same as most other artists. And, of course, now we're in lockdown again. Are you being at home often now? Are you working on new songs? Are you working on another album? What are you doing at home?
Yeah.
Or are you relaxing?
No, what happened with Tribute? So I finished Tribute, and then when I got home from Cuba, I engineer my own records usually. So that album, I mixed it. So I spent all of February and March and April and May working on the album, mixing it and getting it all ready. So most of 2020 I spent finishing off Tribute. And then that got released in September of 2020. And we did a few shows to support that, but not many, obviously. And then I didn't write much at all in 2021 because I had just finished, the way I sort of work is I write songs and then I put out an album and then you go tour the album. And I didn't really have any ideas and I was a bit discouraged because I thought like, well, I'm there's no point in writing new songs because I've got this new album with new songs. And I gotta get that out there. So actually, what happened is we haven't had a whole lot of chance to promote Tribute, but now, ever since this year, 2022, I've been writing every day. So I've probably written about 12, 14 tunes in the last 2 or 3, 4 weeks. So. Yeah, it feels good to be back writing. I mean, I'm still going to be promoting Tribute because we haven't had much chance to do that, but I am writing now.
Oh, that's good to hear, Bud. And it does come in waves, that's for sure. Let's do this. We're talking about Tribute. Let's play a song off of Tribute right now and let the folks hear this song off your new album from 2020. I have Jack DeKeyzer on the show, folks. The song we're going to listen to, his song is called Coming Up, right here on this House of Musicians radio show on Reality Radio 101.
Keep me
Welcome back, folks. We have Jack DeKeyzer on this this evening's episode of this House of Musicians radio show. Jack has released 11 CDs, probably 12 now, because I'm just with Tribute, and Jack has worked with many as a guitar session musician with Etta James, Otis Rush, John Hammond Jr., Ronnie Hawkins, Duke Robillard, Robert Gordon, Willie Big Eye Smith, Bo Diddley, and Blue Rodeo. Jack, wow, man, that's just amazing. But we just heard Jack's song Coming Up. Jack, tell me where that song came from. And man, what ripping guitar in that song. It's just what a killer song, bud.
Oh, thanks. Well, I was just trying to make an album, trying to write songs that were like straight up blues. Most of the album is, because the album prior to that was an album. I know it's kind of funny because this album's called Tribute, but that one was sort of like a tribute to Chess Records, where I did all cover tunes, all classic blues albums that were on the Chess Records label. Songs by Howlin' Wolf and Elmore James and Otis Rush. So for the next album that was going to be original again, Tribute, I thought, well, I want to write a bunch of blues songs. So Coming Up was sort of based, I based it on the Freddie King song Going Down. And I did my take on it and rewrote it and called it Coming Up.
Awesome, man. Yep. You can definitely hear the influence in there. I know you said you were influenced by the Beatles, as well as some other people when you were younger, but Beatles really aren't heavy blues band. I guess they have some bluesy songs. What blues artists are you influenced by?
Well, what happened was, when I first started playing, I was just a kid, right? So I was playing like the stuff on the radio. And then as I got better, I started meeting some good musicians. And at that time I was listening to like Hendrix and Cream and Zeppelin. And these older guys were telling me, well, that's not a Rolling Stones song. That's a Willie Dixon song. So they started playing me Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters. And when I heard those records, I just kind of flipped out. And that's when I really got turned on to blues, when I was about 17, 18. So most of my career I've spent playing blues. And so my blues influences are pretty well the same as everybody's, right? Robert Johnson. I love B.B. King, Freddie King, Albert King. I love Otis Rush. Magic Sam, all the Chicago blues guys, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters. So a lot of the album songs on Tribute are influenced by the blues.
Fabulous, yeah. Great album as well. So go ahead, sorry. The kind of cool thing is that the new songs I've been writing in 2022, they are very Beatle oriented. So it could go in that direction. Absolutely looking forward to hearing that. I know in 2009 you received accolades from two very Canadian institutions. First, the Prime Minister Stephen Harper's son Ben, because he received a guitar lesson from you, as per request from the First Lady Lorraine Harper. Man, tell me how that all came about and what that was like. That must have been pretty cool.
That was, well, I'm not a conservative, but it was weird because I was. It was like around this time of year. It was a really cold, snowy, like it might have been February, and it was just that sort of really dead part of winter. And I turned on my computer, and there was an email saying, "I've always been a fan of your music, and would you consider coming to 24 Sussex and giving our son a guitar lesson?" And I'm reading that. I'm reading it. Barry, at first when I read it, I thought, this is like a really clever Canadian version of I'm an African prince. And,
right.
Give me your PIN number and I'll empty up your bank account for you. So right. I'm reading it and I get to the end and it says Lorraine Harper. And I think, wow, that's crazy. So I'm looking at this email for about 5 minutes and I thought, well, it looks like it might be the real deal. So I wrote back and and then she called me and she said she'd been a really big fan for many years. And so, yeah, we were actually playing in Ottawa a couple of weeks later. So we went a day early, and I went up and gave their son a guitar lesson, and he was actually quite good. I think he was only about 14 or 15 at the time. And so we got to go to Sussex and see the house and do a tour of that. And Stephen Harper wasn't around though. It was just Lorraine and her son.
Yeah, but how cool is that, man? Not too many artists get that opportunity. I mean, it's pretty darn cool.
Well, you know what? I got a bit of backlash from it. Like people that thought, that didn't really like Stephen Harper's policies. They were kind of coming on to me saying, you shouldn't have done that. But I don't know. It's hard to say. I just said I was giving their son a guitar lesson, and I was flattered that they were fans, and actually Stephen Harper did end up coming to a show the next time we played in Ottawa, and he plays piano, and he was politics aside, it was very cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, the thing about politics is you see a lot of followers, not that we talk about politics or religion much on this show, but you see a lot of people on Facebook saying F Trudeau and this and that. And 90% of them don't even know what's going on. They're just following the herd, right?
Oh, for sure. And in a country like Canada too, I think this is probably going to sound terrible, but it doesn't matter. Like big business runs countries. It almost doesn't matter who's in power unless
Agreed.
unless you completely manage to overthrow the system and have a super fair system. It's like it's always going to be big business that dictates it. So whether it's the liberals or the conservatives, it's not going to make a hell of a whole lot of difference how the country is being run.
I agree 100%, and I've often said that, and that's, I'm not involved in politics, and I don't know much about politics. First of all, I don't really watch the news, but second of all, I agree with you 100%. It has really nothing to do with the guy that's in power. And people just start hating on that situation, that person, and then it just trickles down to people that don't even know what they're talking about. It's really amusing to watch, especially on social media. Very amusing to watch. But anyway, off the politics talk here, I have an email from Doug Robertson. Doug's from the band Roller Coaster, fabulous Canadian band called Roller Coaster, very professional and experienced musicians. And Doug says, first of all, he sent me 2 emails. And the second one says, wow, awesome tune after he listened to your song. And he said, hey, Barry, really looking forward to hearing Jack's story. Seen Jack many times over the years. Love his music and style. Doug Robertson, Roller Coaster.
Ah, well, thanks, Doug. That's very cool.
Yeah, there you go. Tell me about where you recorded. Now, do you do this album tribute at your place?
I did, yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's ever since digital recording came, my recording career, I don't know, like when I first started recording with the Bobcats in the 80s, I don't know what it was, but I did not like the sound of the studio we recorded in. And then I made my first couple of solo albums were done in really, really expensive studios. And I did not really like the sound of them. And then a couple years later, there was a great musician named Alex Fraser who plays bass, and he played bass for Jeff Healey. And he started recording out of people's houses, and we were recording, and we were just doing it live, recording live at wherever we were going. And I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to record, because most of my favorite records were guys just setting up in the studio and playing live. And so then once the digital equipment was available to guys like me, I learned how to use it, and we just started recording the band live at my house or whatever spaces sounded good. And that's how I like to do it. I just like to go in and record live.
Well, when you're as good as you are, and I'm sure the musicians that play with you, then playing live is definitely not an issue. And, even I'm not saying that you've made mistakes playing live, but even if you do, it's so unnoticeable in the recording down the road or in the finished product down the road. But it's a real hard thing to do, play live off the floor and record it, and it be good. So good for you for doing that. So you're playing live, but do you add backing tracks or tracks later down the road, or it's just straight off the floor? Because it's very impressive to do that.
The coming up was actually all just straight off the floor. There's no overdubs. It was just guitar, piano, bass, drums, and I even sang live. And most of the album was recorded like that, Barry. There's a few tunes on it where we added some backup vocals, or we might add a rhythm guitar, or add some percussion. I think I added a couple of horns on a couple songs. So yeah, I mean, I like doing that too. It's fun to add little textures and little sweeteners on top of the bed tracks. But yeah, 99% of it was done live in the studio.
Yeah, cream of the crop to be able to go in, as I say, so impressive to be able to go in and play live off the floor and record it. It's just so impressive. Good for you. Writing process. I know for me, when I write, I will grab my guitar, put a couple of riffs down on my phone. I probably have 400 of them, and then maybe come back and listen a couple weeks later to some of the riffs. And if I still am in love with that riff, I may turn it into a song and write the words later. Not all the time, but probably 80% of the time. Sometimes words just pop in my head and I write them down and create a song around that. But what's your writing process?
It's for many years, used to be I would come up with a song title, and if the song title was like kind of catchy or clever enough, the song would almost write itself. Like I wrote a country song for a band called Prairie Oyster, and I came up with the idea of a title. It was called "I Think That We Did Something We Weren't Supposed to Do," and it was like a classic country cheating song. And I would find that when I had the song title would almost dictate like what style of music it would be. So when that title came to my head, I thought, yeah, that sounds like a country song. So I would write from a title and then write the words, and then, as I said, the mood of the title or the lyrics would dictate what kind of music it would be, and then I'd write the melody and chords after. But lately, the last few years, I've taken more to, I just sit down with records that I really like, and I'll just start copying the record. And, I mean, it never ends up sounding like the thing that you're copying, but I just find it's a good way to go, because I'll think, okay, what's the theme of this song? What are they singing about? What's the style of the song? And I'll copy the style of the song. And what's the chord changes? Maybe I'll try to copy some of the chord changes of the groove. And then I start thinking about, okay, how does this relate to my life? What happened in my life that would be similar to the sentiments in this song? And then I just apply my experience to that song. And then by the end of it, if I played it for you, you'd never know that I go like, oh, I try to copy this from a song on Sticky Fingers or something. You'd never know.
Yeah, and well, we all do it. All musicians do it. It's a natural instinct to do that, be influenced by other songs and go, what a great groove, and turn it into something that's your own. It's very common, I think. Oh,
yeah, I think so. But yeah, it's like I said, it was like for years I would just go from a song title, but the last few years I kind of changed it and started just thinking more like trying to. Well, the thing that was happening was I was writing songs, but they weren't always in the style that I wanted them to be in. Like I'd write a song and go like, well, I've got this folk rock song. I can't do anything with that. I can't use that on stage. Or I've got a country song. So was just like I said a couple years ago. I just decided, like, I'm gonna write a Freddie King type songs because I know I'll be able to play that on stage. So that's what I started doing, is just copying the people that I was.
Yep. Sorry, you're still there, Jack?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought I heard something. I thought I heard you disconnect. Anyway, you mentioned Prairie Oyster. We had Keith Glass on the show. What an amazing guest he was. Just as you are. Prairie Oyster is a great band. Of course, they've been around for an awful long time as well.
Oh yeah.
I want to ask you about you're driving down the street now. I don't know if you're into a lot of the newer music that's out. But if you're driving down the road, let's just say, I know we don't use CDs anymore, but if you had to throw a CD in tomorrow going to your doctor's appointment, who would it be? And it doesn't have to be somebody new. I'm just asking who it would be.
Yeah. Well, actually, my cars are so old, they do have CD players. And I always tell people that we have CDs for sale, and if your car doesn't have a CD player in it, we have some old cars we can sell you with CD players.
There you go, car and CD. There you go. I'm just curious if you're influenced by any of the newer music that's out.
I know it's terrible. I mean, I know people always say, you're always influenced by the stuff that you grew up in high school, and yep. I'm not that different. I mean, but when I see the popularity of, like, the Rolling Stones probably were like the number one concert attraction in the world, right? They probably still are. And I listen to the Rolling Stones, the Beatles. I mean, that the Get Back sessions that were on TV a couple weeks ago. Huge draw, right? The Beatles still probably, if they were touring, would be one of the top bands in the world. So I listen to the Beatles. I listen to the Stones. I still listen to I love Led Zeppelin. I listen to Jimi Hendrix. And the other stuff, I'm really into jazz. So I love Blue Note jazz, which is the more the bluesy kind of soulful jazz. And I listen to a lot of Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Art Blakey and all those Blue Note artists. So yeah, usually when I'm driving, I listen to a lot of jazz.
Good for you. That's awesome to hear. And let me ask you this: what was the music scene like back in the day compared to now? Like, I know we have social media and streaming and all that stuff, but I just want to get your sense of thought about how different the music scene is now compared to, say, when you did your first album. Oh,
it's like when I first started playing with a blues guy named King Biscuit, it was back in the days when you could play like 5-6 nights a week in a club, and then often they'd even have a Saturday matinee. So you'd get like you get to be a really good musician because you're playing like 3 hours every night, every day. And then oftentimes we'd be playing all day because we'd be in some crappy hotel room just sitting around playing guitar. And so I saw that go from 5-6 nights a week to then when I started my solo career in '85, I was playing usually 4 nights a week. And then it started going to like 2 nights a week. And then I'd say for the last long time, it's just been one-nighters. So, it's a big difference. It's like now I pretty well only do one-nighters and travel around the city to city. But yeah, that has really changed because, as I said before, you'd go to Kitchener and you'd play a 4 or 5 nighter. And then the next week you'd go to Ottawa and play a 4 or 5 nighter. And then the next week you'd go to Montreal. So it was a lot more, there were a lot more gigs.
Yeah, the scene is definitely, as far as live music and small bars, well, especially now, I guess, since COVID, there's a lot of bars closing up, which is so unfortunate. But even before COVID, the music scene kind of died out as far as the clubbers. I remember playing the Soho in Kennedy and Eglinton from 9 to 1, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But Saturday night, we'd pack up at 1 and drive down to the Matador and play from 2 to 5. So that was crazy, lots of gigging, as you say. And now it's kind of not that big of a scene as far as the whole weekend thing. Geez, I remember doing the Crossroads, and I think we played 5 or 6 nights and a matinee for next to nothing back in the day. So times it's up. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, just to let your listeners know, you're 2 to 5 at the Matador. That was 2 a.m. to 5 a.m.
That's right, 2 to 5. Yeah, what a time we had there playing, boy. Those were some amazing days, and those days I think are gone forever. But geez, they were so much fun to do. That's for sure.
Yeah,
no question about that.
When I was a kid, I mean, if you, I was saying this to my wife, like if you wanted, I'd heard about a jazz guitar player named Joe Pass, who was a genius, right? But you'd have to go down to the record store, to Sam's or wherever, and then, well, we had a smaller Sam's in Hamilton. That's where I spent my teenage years. And then you'd go and you'd look and you'd see Joe Pass, and there'd be nothing in the section. So you wouldn't get to hear Joe Pass that month. And then, maybe the next month you'd go back and you'd find a Joe Pass record. And, once a week there might be some music on TV. But nowadays, if you want to hear Joe Pass, you can go on YouTube and you can hear every Joe Pass song ever recorded. You can hear guys covering Joe Pass. You can hear 10 guys giving you a Joe Pass guitar lesson. It's like, there's so much more music available today than there was when we were kids, right? Because when we were kids, the only way you were going to see it was if they came to your town to play, or they happened to have a copy of the record in the record store, or it came on TV, which was probably highly doubtful. So yeah, I mean, there's pluses and negatives to it, right? There's a lot more availability of music these days.
Agreed. And for me, social media is very bittersweet. It's great that you can get any kind of information you want. As you say, Joe Pass, you can watch anything at all by him. Young kids that are 7 years old can learn how to be a masterful guitar player now by YouTube and doing whatever. So for me, it's bittersweet. It's a great thing for information, bad thing because I think it, financially for the musicians, I don't think it's as good as when they were selling tons of vinyl albums and tons of CDs and whatnot. Now the artist kind of has to sell their CD at the gigs and whatnot. I mean, sure, they can still sell online, but it's not the same.
No, it's definitely it's hard to figure out right now. I mean, my audience is a bit older, obviously, because I'm older, but they're still buying CDs, so I can still make CDs work. But yeah, if I was a young musician, I don't know, like it's pretty bad. Like you somehow have to get hundreds of thousands of people to stream your song before you can make any money at it. And unless you're getting a few 100,000 streams or 1 million streams, you're not going to make any money from recording. So I don't really know how people can do it anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely tough on the younger musicians for sure. And getting gigs would be tougher nowadays for them as well. So it's a tough thing. Lucky for me, I've only ever treated music as a hobby and fun. And if I got paid at the bar for doing it, that would be good for me, except for I usually owed the bar money after my pay by the end of each gig from partying. But anyway, that's a whole nother show. Let's play another song off your album, Jack, your album 2020. The album's called Tribute. The song's called Shake What Your Mama Gave You. I have the amazing Jack DeKeyzer on the show this evening, folks. Again, we're going to hear Shake What Your Mama Gave You on this House of Musicians radio show right here on Reality Radio 101.
Show that love, you got it all, mama. Surrender. Shake what your mama gave you. strut your stuff. Shake it up, shake it down. You can own this a whole damn town. You had it easy, you had it rough. Use what your mama gave you, oh, strut your stuff. Use what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Oh, strut your stuff. Shake what your mama gave you. Woo! Shake what your mama gave you. Here's what your mama gave you. Oh, that's enough. You got the brains, you got the brawn, you got it all going on. When something bugs you, you got to shake it off. Use what your mama gave you. Oh, strut your stuff. Shake what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Oh, that's enough. Shake what your mama gave you. Use what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Oh, strut your stuff.
Hey, welcome back, fine listener. We have Jack DeKeyzer on the show this evening. We just heard Shake What Your Mama Gave You from his new album called Tribute. Jack, absolutely loving the songs on the album. Tell me where Shake What Your Mama Gave You came from. Love the title.
That one came from the title. And of course, once I had that title, it sounded like a rock and roll song. So, yeah, then it kind of wrote itself. I came up with that little riff, and the rest is history. It was just, it's a bit of a self-help tune too, right, Shay? There's like, you got the beauty, you got the brains, you got the brawn, you got it all going on. If something bugs you, shake it off. Take what your mama gave you, strut stuff.
Absolutely, man. Love it. That's just too cool. Good for you. And folks, so check out Jack DeKeyzer's album online, Tribute. Jack, tell me where people can find you online.
JackDeKeyzer.com. You can pretty well spell it any way you want, and it'll probably show up because I've got it in my website.
Yeah, cool.
It'll still take you to JackDeKeyzer.com, and you can the CDs download it off the website rather than downloading high res. And yeah.
Awesome, folks. Check out Jack's stuff, folks, out there. Jack DeKeyzer is just an amazing blues king here. And Jack, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. One of my favorite questions to ask the artist. Tell me a crazy story that's happened to you on the road, on a tour bus, on stage. Something real crazy that's happened to you.
Well, I was playing at this club called Albert's Hall, which was above the Brunswick Hotel in First Street in the 90s, and it was a great blues club. I played that club with Etta James. I played there with Otis Rush. I played there with Bo Diddley. Most of those people that you named that's where I played with those people. But I was playing a night there with my band, and it was packed. It was a Friday night, and we're playing a slow blues, and I had my eyes closed, and I was really, really into this solo. And all of a sudden, I felt this kind of presence, and I opened my eyes, and there was a tiger's head about 5 feet away from me. And
Tiger's head?
Yeah, and attached to a tiger's body. And and it was a woman in this studded leather bikini that she was holding this tiger by this heavy chain. And this was Toronto in the 90s, folks. I don't think it was wild and crazy, but I just looked in the bed. I went, play quieter. And she kind of smiled at me, and then she could tell I was kind of freaked out. And then the doorman grabbed her and said, "Okay, you gotta leave." But there was. Do you remember a thing called Jim Rose's Freak Show Circus or something? It was some traveling kind of freak show that used to happen in the 90s, and she was part of the show, and she was had tigers, and she came upstairs into the bar with a live tiger.
Geez, I've heard a lot of amazing artist stories, but this one takes the cake. I mean, and their heads are huge.
Oh, it was like I opened my eyes, and it was 5 feet away from me, just its head right there, and she's holding it by this chain, looking at me, smiling, and I'm thinking like, holy crap! I don't know if this is such a great idea, having a tiger here with a live band, but yeah, it was that freaked me out.
I bet it freaked you out. I couldn't imagine anything like that. That's just crazy, Jack. I'll tell you what, a live tiger 5 feet from your head doing a show, that's insanity. Anyway, wonderful to have you. Before we go, Jack, there's a segment of the show I like to do called, Well, Gary LeBar, what do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I think. Jack, I love, your guitar sound is so reminiscent of Hendrix's sound back in the day, the Strat sound. I don't know if you were using Plexi amps or Marshalls or whatever to get that really nice tone out of your guitar. I love that. And I also love your music. People don't write like this anymore. When there's a bass line and a melody line, a lot of times the bass line, of course, is following a chord or a root note. And I love the way that a lot of your guitar parts and bass parts are the same. So you're basically playing the same thing, like you're both playing the lead parts, bass and it gives it that nice bottom end, when you're playing your leads. And I kind of like that, like those little breaks in the song. And I like a lot of the pedal toning of the piano. That reminds me of 60s, 70s blues and rock and roll. So, I love the way you write. I think we come from the same generation, so we kind of love the same stuff. But I love your guitar sound. It's got a really nice tone to it. Yeah, and I wish you the best. I know you're going to be gigging in the future, the very near future, and I'm hoping the best with all this COVID stuff so you can get out there. As you were talking about how artists make money now, it's very hard to make any kind of income with downloads and sales. You need to make money from ticket sales and performing. That's where it's at. So I'm hoping that all your future gigs are sold out and you stay healthy. Good luck to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Gary. Really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. And I guess our next closest show will be at the Market Hall Theater Peterborough on April 2nd.
Excellent.
I'm taking a note. April 2nd. My wife and I, Peterborough. Sorry, what's that again? What the Market Hall?
Market Hall, yeah.
Okay, Jack, you know what? My wife and I are avid music lovers and avid concert goers. I'm going to make a point of trying to get out there and see you playing on April the 2nd. Really appreciate you being on the show. I want to continue to follow your progress and get you back on the show in a year or two. That'd be fabulous.
Absolutely. You're a great host. Great questions. Thank you so much, Barry.
Thank you so much, Jack. And to the listener, I say thank you for being here. Always dance and sing, and let the music bring your soul to the surface for all the world to see. Until next time, have a shuffle your feet kind of week, and good night. You've been listening to This House of Musicians on Reality Radio 101.